Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rosenfeld, founder of Freshwater Investments, and this is Coffee with a T-Bird podcast. I sit down with fellow T-Birds who are making an impact in business, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Each episode features conversations that explore the pivotal moments, personal motivations, and lessons learned on their journeys. Whether you're a student, alum, or someone passionate about business and personal growth, you'll walk away with fresh ideas. This is a bit more than a podcast. It's a platform for connections, storytelling, and celebrating the global spirit of Thunderbird. This podcast is sponsored by Freshwater Investments. At Freshwater, we make it simple for you to invest in large apartment communities across the United States so you can earn passive income, grow your capital, and benefit from real estate tax breaks without owning or managing property yourself. Hi, everyone. My guest today is Shawn Gallegly, a global marketing leader with over 20 years of experience driving growth for brands like Coca-Cola, Monster, and Carlsberg. Today, he's the president and chief marketing officer at Apipharma USA, where he's doubled growth year after year. Beyond the boardroom, Shawn's collected some great stories, from sitting behind Gorbachev on a flight, to working in Lagos, to visiting every country in Europe except Portugal. He's seen it all, and he's here to share both insights and stories. Let's dive in. Hi, Shawn. Welcome.
Hey, good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Where do I find you?
North Scottsdale.
North Scottsdale. It's got to be warm today.
You know the rule. When you went to Thunderbird, it's you don't talk about the warmth, you just say it's a dry heat.
Yeah, it's a dry heat. That's right. Okay, so let's start with a fun one. You okay. Said that you once sat behind Mikhail Gorbachev on a flight. What's the story there?
Yeah, so this was back. I was working for a joint venture with Coke and Nestle in Zurich, and I had responsibility for Poland, Russia, Hungary, and then it ended up being all of Eastern Europe. So I had to fly to Zurich, to Moscow often. And it was a very early morning flight, flying out of Domodedovo, and get picked up at the hotel at 4 a.m. for a 9 o'clock flight, because that just the security and make sure you got there in time and go through all the craziness. So it was very early, and I got onto the plane flying back to Zurich. And it was a 3-3 seat configuration, 3 on each side. And I got onto the plane, and I on these flights, I would always just go immediately into a nap until we took off. And there was a Swiss guy sitting next to me on my left, and the Swiss guy next to me on the right. And I was just kind of starting to nap. And then a couple of people sit in front of me. And the guy that was sitting in front of me was just kind of getting comfortable. And I could just see the back of his head. And I'm balding, so I can say this. I was just like, I look and I'm thinking, please sit still. I'm so tired. If you keep moving, I'm just going to tap the back of your head. And flight takes off. And I think about an hour and a half into the flight, I wake up and I notice the seat in front of me is vacant. And I turn and look, and it's Mikhail Gorbachev coming down from the restroom on the plane, and then sitting and plopping down right in front of me. I thought to myself, probably a good thing that I didn't give him a little tap on the flight, because he had Mr. and Mrs. Missing Link on the left and right side of him, his guards, and the Swiss guy sitting next to me had this kind of surprised expression on his face, saying, "Oh my gosh, that's Mikhail Gorbachev." And he was studying Russian, and he opens up his Russian book and he flips to this page where there's a picture of Mikhail Gorbachev. And so he walks up mid-flight, because then I think most of the business class had recognized, oh my God, that's Mikhail Gorbachev. And all these Russians come up and saying, "No, Gorby," and getting autographs. And he was very kind about it. And so the Swiss gentleman sitting next to me goes up and hands his book to Mikhail Gorbachev. And as he describes it, because I was sitting, I couldn't really see what was happening, but Mikhail Gorbachev's looking at this picture, and he starts writing. And he starts writing, and he starts writing and writing and writing. I mean, it was Dostoevsky. Man, it was just, he was writing forever. And the Swiss guy comes back and goes, look, he's all over the moon excited. He's showing me. And basically, Mikhail Gorbachev wrote, it was a pleasure to meet you on this flight. I am very pleased to know that you're studying the Russian language. The Russian language, while very difficult, is very deep and a beautiful language. And I wish you all the success in learning the language of Russia, Mikhail Gorbachev. And I thought, I mean, goodness me, what a thing to experience. And then, as a side note to that, as the flight was approaching, as we'd fly from Moscow down over into over Germany, but we were flying over the Baltics, and you could see the plane where it was as we were flying over Estonia, and he just kind of points and says something, and I thought to myself, "Good Lord!" I mean, during the crisis that he went through and the dissolution and training to the CIS, just imagine how nervous and what he was going through at that time. On his watch, things changed
Right.
incredibly. And I just caught that moment in time where he was just kind of pointing at the map. And I thought, I wonder what is going through his mind. So absolutely fascinating.
Oh, that's a great story.
And sadly, it was at the time, it was after Raisa had passed. So he was coming to Zurich to accept some peace award. And so I saw him walking through the Zurich terminal as we got off the plane, and he looked in pretty good shape, but what an amazing experience to have had.
Excellent. Okay, let's rewind a little bit back.
Okay.
Let's talk about where did you grow up and what shaped your early ambitions.
Oh yeah, great question. Southern California, small little town. Actually, it was a small town when I was there, Simi Valley. It was a old orange grove city that unfortunately got some negative recognition because the Rodney King trial was there. Right now, it's probably more well known because the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library is there. And so growing up as a kid in little suburbia, I had just found it fascinating because in the junior high school era, we had a lot of Vietnamese refugees that were coming in the mid 70s. And I just started getting curious about different cultures at a relatively young age. And it was curiosity. And I started wondering what's beyond my safe little suburban life here. And in high school, I had a very close buddy of mine from Sweden came over through the AFS exchange program, and he studied with me in my senior year and got to know him and kind of piqued my interest. And I thought, wow, he says, yeah, you just come on over and visit, And I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I began my studies in math and economics at UC Santa Barbara, and they happened to have a beginning Swedish class. And I thought, well, I'll just take this as an elective for kicks. And I really enjoyed it. And at the same time, I got very involved with ISEC, the International Student Organization, and became the vice president of marketing for that organization, and then secured a role. We had to find jobs for students overseas, and then for however many credits we found, we could send people abroad. And then I got matched to work for the Central Bank of Sweden in 1989 and went over and lived in Sweden for a year. So when you start visualizing the little small things that kind of start building up, that kind of evolved into that. And then after that, did a stint working for a World Trade Center for a couple of years, and then went back to graduate school at Thunderbird, and then got hired by Coke.
So did you always imagine yourself working in marketing and global business, or did it?
Well, I was interested because I was a math economics student. I was interested in finance, but one of the things that I really enjoyed was the connection of the facts and figures with the social interaction and building and creating ideas and bringing concepts to life. And that kind of was more of an interest to me than the just the finance route. I mean, working for the Central Bank of Sweden, which was fascinating because I worked in the monetary policy and foreign exchange department as a trainee, writing daily reports that went to the governors of the bank. Basically, I had a Reuters teletype and I was capturing all the news. And during this time, 1989, Hungarians are leaving, things are changing in Europe, and the wall falls. And I was in Berlin 2 months after the wall fell, and I was in Czechoslovakia when it was still Czechoslovakia during the Velvet Revolution. So it's been an electric life so far. Wow. I mean, really.
So the young kid right after college going to Sweden, what it was like?
It was fascinating because I forgot to mention, since the age of 12, I had National Geographic. My grandmother, every Christmas. Oh, and it's a subscription to National Geographic. Map of the world, pinned it to my ceiling every night before I went to bed. I was like, kind of wonder what life's like in Belgium or Sweden or wherever, just curious. And so it was that curious bug that just led to the next steps of discovery. And And when did you graduate Thunderbird?
2005.
Okay, so you weren't there when Herberger was there.
He was just living, yeah, that year.
Oh, he was just leaving at the time. So
Yeah, he left in 2004.
yeah, so when I went to Thunderbird in '95, his speech was Thunderbird, it will change you. I mean, there's no questioning that whatsoever. And it was just, I don't know, just going from small town kid to discovering the world and encountering different things. Yeah, it's just amazing. And I forgot to mention, when I was in Czechoslovakia, the Dalai Lama was right there at the center of Wenceslas Square, laying a wreath where Jan Palach burnt himself in effigy during the sixth. I think it was 1968. So I think I was 2 meters away from him at that time. And then I was hanging out with a kid who was probably my age, 22, 23, who was the newspaper reporter for The Guardian. And we were running after the foreign minister of working for Václav Havel to try to get some quotes from him. And it was just, you kind of felt like, okay, this is maybe what it was like to be in like Hemingway back in the 20s or something like that. It was pinch myself. It was crazy.
That's awesome. So how did you hear about Thunderbird first time, or how did
Well,
Thunderbird got in the picture?
I had known about Thunderbird from my ISEC days. I had, around that crowd of students that I was with, a number of my buddies had gone to Thunderbird probably about 8 years prior to me going. So it was kind of in my mind, it was part of the destination. It just wasn't certain exactly when that was going to be, because I didn't want to go from undergraduate directly to graduate school. I did want to get some runs on the board, if you will. And, so that's just kind of how it evolved, and very exciting.
Excellent. And so let's, if you can share a few favorite moments from your time at Thunderbird.
Goodness me.
I know it's a lot, but let's pick just favorites.
Well, I mean, of course, I think the first most enjoyable thing was first driving to the campus and then driving through the gate, and then getting because I lived on campus, and I think it was the exciting part was, okay, going to the pub the first time, hanging out and meeting your classmates and pub night. And then that was one exciting thing. I think one of the more exciting things for me was actually really getting to the meat and potatoes of some of the marketing classes. And then I think one of the exciting things was being nominated for the Barton Kyle Yount Award. So I was one of three, and I didn't get it, but just to be nominated was a real honor. And which is interesting because I'm trying to remember the professor's name, but he taught marketing, and then he went and taught at the campus in Aarsham. And when I started working for Coca-Cola in Norway, I came and did a presentation to the students at the Aarsham campus, and I gave him this Coca-Cola plaque, and then I had book bags with the Coca-Cola logo stitched up. And when the students came into the room, there was about 100 bags I gave away, and everybody got some Coca-Cola and some stuff. So, it's kind of a full circle fun story on that regard, being able to contribute back as little as it was. So those are some fun. I mean, now there's some other crazy stories. I'm, of course, paella night and craziness involved in paella night. But I think one of the most funny parts was when we finished our studies, a couple of us who like to golf a lot, we decided we'd make the Thunderbird Open midnight golfing with glow-in-the-dark golf balls. And one of the holes was from one side of the A dorm to the other side of the A dorm, which meant you had to shoot over the dorms. I think that there's some... and of course, it was just one of those crazy things that you do. And yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So how did you find your first job after Thunderbird, or while at Thunderbird?
Well, actually, fascinating, because at that time, 1994, 93, 95, Coca-Cola was expanding immensely through Eastern Europe, because obviously with the change of the CIS creation, the wall coming down, there was a very entrepreneurial Norwegian named Tore Bu who was running Coca-Cola Norway, and he had approached the leadership in Atlanta to go in and establish Coca-Cola in Russia. And so the creation of the Coca-Cola Nordic and Northern Eurasia division happened, I think, in 94, 93. And there was actually a Thunderbird grad from the 80s who was HR director in Coca-Cola Norway. And so they'd Coca-Cola came, did a presentation and did some recruiting, and a little bit of the Swedish that I had involvement with that, I think, was a bit of a leg up. But long and short of it is I secured a role we had a group in that team called the Emerging Brands Group. So we were responsible for all the new product development innovation. And so that's where I started first cutting my teeth in Coca-Cola, was in the Oslo office. And I was there about a year and a half, and then the division changed and it moved down to Copenhagen. And then I moved to Copenhagen, and then the ball just kept rolling. But that's how I got into the Coca-Cola organization.
Got it. Well, what's the what it was like to compete internally throughout the years at Coca-Cola?
Well, the thing is, Coca-Cola is very compete
internally with other Thunderbird grads and kind of growing inside the company.
It's funny because there were a couple Thunderbirds that were actually working within the division that I was at, but I think that it wasn't so much kind of competition. It was more of a cooperative engagement a lot of us had, I think. So when I think to the time in the early days in Coca-Cola, everything was relatively new because you learn your book marketing and then you get into the real marketing, and Coca-Cola from a consumer marketing standpoint, I think is probably one of the top drawers out there. And P&G, Unilever, those are all very good, exceptionally. These are all top marketing organizations where you're asking a lot of questions. You're getting very strategic in your thinking. And so I think there's a lot of cooperation, but there's a lot of competition because everybody wants their next big role. But at that time, there was so much growth opportunity for not just the business, but for the expansion and bringing more and more people in, that it was very fertile ground for somebody who had the drive, determination, perseverance to just keep accelerating. And that's essentially what happened for me. Is I think back to some of the first projects I was working on was a tonic water in the Baltics, and doing consumer research in Latvia and splitting the consumer groups between Russian-speaking Latvians and Latvians.
Mm-hmm.
And, thinking, okay, this is interesting. We'll get some insights. But, you started learning about the cultural dynamics. The Russian-speaking Latvians, they were very difficult to do consumer research with because you ask a question that was a bit abstract, and then they would spend the next 5-10 minutes trying to understand the question exactly so they could provide the appropriate answer. And the moderator was just perplexed. So basically say, I'm sorry, there's nothing really for me to translate because they're debating with the moderator in the room right now. What does this mean? Cutting your teeth on some projects like that and putting things forward. And then the exciting part was also working on Powerade and putting together a sports drink strategy for the Nordics. And then moving down to a role in Denmark at the country office, because division office and country office are two different things. In the division office, you're working with strategy. In the country office, you're working with strategy, but then you're putting into application and commercializing it much more. So that was a lot of fun. And so evolving from that, it just.
So can you walk me through the process when Coca-Cola is entering a new market like Ukraine? Let's say they make a decision that's a strategic market for us. We want to get in there and start selling. What would be the process like?
Well, let me give you a really perfect example. And it was Ukraine came after, but the first was Russia, when I was working with the joint venture with Coke and Nestle, going into that market with an iced tea product. It involved a lot of consumer research just to, if we're going to be investing new capital equipment to produce this product, which is different than the soft drinks, very involved. And I thought, from all the work I'd done already previously, that this was going to be pretty straightforward. Do some consumer research, get some insights, dial up some of the things that we're understanding, and should be fine. First set of focus groups, I about fell off my chair going, what the hell is going on here? Because we went in translating iced tea into холодный chai, which literally means cold tea.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound that good in Russian.
Your reaction is exactly, the people in the focus groups are like, well, I feel like I'm in a hospital and people are dying. And I'm like, where is this coming from? What? And so a couple sessions of that, sat back, scratched our head and go, what's going on? And then we tweaked some things a bit. And then there was one guy in a focus group. He says, well, wait, when you're talking halal in the chai, are you talking about you take like what we do when in summer, when we go to the dacha, just go pick some berries, make some compote, and then mix it with some tea that we let sit on the counter? Oh, Ojushka chai, refreshing tea. And it was like, and everybody goes, ping. I get it. I understand it. And all of a sudden it was just like the heaven opens up, the angels are singing, and you go, okay, now we have a clear path. So completely went into this with defining the category by a literal translation. And, even my Russian colleagues were, yeah, that sounds fine. But then we found out the research, no, that doesn't work. We'll go with Ojushka chai, and boom. And then everything, and we launched, and it went. The most enjoyable part for me was when I was pitching within our team to say, we're going to hit 10 million unit cases, which is unit cases like 5.6 liters. So 56 million liters within 3 years. And everybody's rolling their eyes like, yeah, come on. You're not going to be able to sell more than we're selling these countries. Boom. We did more than that after 3 years. So it was super exciting.
But when you're launching, you producing it inside Russia, or you bring the iced tea from somewhere?
Yeah. So for the Russian market, we and then I didn't even talk about the costs and the financial breakdown and figuring out how the dynamics of that are going to work out. But it was cost prohibitive to produce it in Hungary. And even because at that time, the tariffs were still high for products coming from Western Europe into Russia, or the CIS at that time. And we knew that the only way that the economics were going to work was to put in a production line. And we were working with a production line that was new. So we were using an aseptic filling technology that allowed us to have lighter weight bottles, which drove the cost down. But the line that we had we thought, let's be conservative. So the line that was invested was not a very high volume line, and it was designed to fill Powerade and Nestea. And there was a decision made to prioritize Powerade. So that put us off by 1 year, which was actually okay because it gave them a year to work out the bugs and get the filling line to where it was running smoothly. But, the trick was getting out there with the right message, communicating and educating the consumers. And this was also part of the strategy that we had put, because there were markets in different stages of understanding the iced tea category. Say Switzerland, they've been drinking it forever and ever and ever, versus Russia that had no new sense of it. So we were focusing on the refreshment benefit of it rather than talking about the tea's good for you and it's healthy for you, because they already knew that. It's about understanding what phase to go into the market with. And then we went in with very heavy advertising, because at that time, the cost of advertising was very cheap. So television advertising worked well, and we had a lot of outdoor. And then we started sponsoring beach volleyball. And so we had a beach volleyball tournament in the center of Moscow with Nestea beach volleyball tournament that was really exciting and fun. But a lot of sampling, in-store sampling, getting people to just try the product, to understand it, and then just evolve and evolve and evolve. It was a very interesting opportunity, but the biggest make or break was the understanding what the category name was best suited for the consumers. Yeah.
And how did you set up the distribution system?
Well, of course, we had the Coca-Cola bottling operation, which is the success of Coca-Cola. Is everybody likes to think it's a strategy in the commercials. Nah. At the end of the day, it's the Coca-Cola bottling system. So the second largest Coca-Cola bottler in the world is Coca-Cola Hellenic. And they're now based in Zug, Switzerland. Actually, I know the CEO very well. We go way back, because he's from Croatia. And really, really, really great guy who's done an incredible job. And the team there has done a really wonderful job. Great training of the people in sales, operations, equipment placement. And actually, that's a very interesting thing as well, because the costs we were basically putting a single door cooler at every kiosk in the city. And so we had Nestea coolers all over the place. And that was really helping get within what Coca-Cola used to refer to as getting the product within an arm's reach of desire of the consumer and making sure we were placed in the right place at the right price and then sample. I think in the first 3 or 4 years, we spent nearly 50% of the budget on sampling, just sampling products, giving free products away, giving tastings, and creating a new category involves a lot of that. And I think
And
that
so this is the initial investment, right? It's kind of going down slowly.
Well, once you get people familiar with the category, then it's about amplifying your differentiation versus the competition, because obviously Lipton was in pretty strong, and they were trying to highlight some aspects of the benefits that they were offering. And for us, it was not so much the sampling anymore, but we didn't drop the sampling to what some companies do, like 5-10%. No, it had always stayed at about 25%. And honestly, I don't know what it's at right now, because I left Coca-Cola back, 13 years ago.
But you did spend 15 years at Coca-Cola, and I think it's a good time to talk about lessons that you learned while at Coca-Cola. And I wanted to kind of split the question in two parts.
Sure.
Maybe we can talk about marketing and sales lessons first, and then about managing people, because you were in very high positions there too.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that.
Okay. Well, I mean, if we talk about managing people, it's really, we used to, different countries had different styles. So I'll go back when I was living in Moscow and working with Eastern European folks, and because I was responsible for Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Birthdays are incredibly important. And thankfully I had a colleague there who gave me the heads up on this, because he said, "Hey, next week is Sasha's birthday." Okay. I'm like, okay, great. I'll make sure to say happy birthday. He says, no. It's not just say happy birthday and slap him on the back. I said, oh, really? And I dug into the understanding, because the biggest celebrations for people in the Soviet Union at the time, and I say that because that's these people were from, is New Year's and birthday. And if you're a teacher, the first day of school, because the teachers get adorned with flowers, and the parents go crazy because they have to spend so much money giving flowers to the teachers. But managing people of the different cultures and knowing the dynamic, because knowledge was a very key thing in Russia and Ukraine. If people had an inside track on something, they'd hold that very close. So it was about trying to create the team environment and inspire and give them the motivation necessary, but also listen to them, because a lot of them like having the opportunity to share their knowledge. Because I will tell you this, some of the best marketers that I ever had were female from Eastern Europe who studied the soft science. And that's what it was called. And I'm not trying to be pejorative about it, but it was called the soft science, philosophy, psychology, where the men would study aeronautical engineering and, all that. I tried in vain to hire 4 or 5 male brand managers when I was working in Russia to balance out the team. I thought we need a little bit of diversification in the team to add to the insights. It was impossible. It was so impossible. Giving in the ear, listening, and then and this was a great lesson for the team there, was I basically said, guys, my job is to be the bulldozer. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to bulldoze the little road. I'm going to pull off to the side. And then you guys just go and do what we've hired you to do. And giving them that sense of confidence that I'm going to be behind them as long as they are not going on a deviant track. We set the strategy, we lay out the path. Happy to hear any input to modifying that. But then you guys go out, lock and load, do what you're supposed to do. And the success that they had was really, it was important for me to provide them the accolades to that, because, success and recognition of success is not something that I think in the Eastern European theater was much as it is in the U.S. And I think in the U.S. we overplayed. Oh, here is your participation trophy for 14th place. So, but it was interesting because there were the cultural dynamics. Ukrainian colleague who was working, I put her on our energy drink brand. She was incredibly, matter of fact, she's now heading up Mars. She's a general manager for Mars for Ukraine. She had to leave during the conflict that's going on right now. And I think she's back, but she was an incredible talent. But there was this Ukraine-Russia thing. It was an interesting dynamic. You just had to make certain that everybody knew that she was the person to do the job and she's going to do it, making certain that the people understood that the opportunities for growth were very good as well, not just within the territories they were, but for other opportunities to go overseas. So we had a lot of opportunities to do trips. And so I took a number of my marketing directors we went to Shanghai to visit the Coca-Cola Research Center for Traditional Chinese Medicine. And then we went to Tokyo to meet with the innovation team. So we were basically combing ideas from other places. And so using these business development opportunity trips for advancing the development of people was also very, very important.
And let's talk a bit about the marketing lessons and sales lessons from your time at Coca-Cola.
The marketing lessons, that you're always going to learn something. And I will tell you one thing. Once you become a Coca-Cola marketeer, when you walk into a grocery store, you can't go into a grocery store like a normal person does. You're critical. You're walking down the aisle and looking at the product developments, and you go, what are they thinking there? And then you start thinking like, well, what's their thinking behind that? Some of the best market lessons are those that when you know what the idea is and it either fails miserably or successful beyond your wildest dreams, it's about doing the analysis afterwards to understand how you can amplify that and how you try to avoid that. I would say outside of that interesting thing with launching Nestle in Russia, was a real interesting lesson was during those times that we had some consumer perception that Coca-Cola is a very unhealthy company making brown sugared water. Our health scores were in the tank, but we were only in Russia for maybe 10 years, right? We all knew that. And I put forth a strategic solution to where we could try to help that and also leverage the reemergence of some old categories that were coming back. So one thing that we didn't talk about earlier was with my team in Russia, successfully was the first team to launch a fermented beverage in the entire history of Coca-Cola. We made a kvass, and it was very interesting because we didn't have the technology to do it at Coca-Cola.
Maybe we should mention what kvass is, and it's basically a bread beverage, right? It used to be sold in former Soviet Union in huge yellow tanks outside on the street, and people were lining up and drinking. People were drinking it from those big yellow tanks. But now Coca-Cola is doing it.
Well, back in 2005, when I was there, God, that was 20 years ago. The business in 2005, the economics in Russia was on fire. I mean, every Western company was investing in, and at the end of the day, we were hitting all of our targets, hitting all of our numbers. Coke, Diet Coke, Fanta, Sprite, just growing and growing. And it was like, okay, we're doing well. Okay, what are we missing? And Coca-Cola's research, we have a thing called the consumer beverage landscape, where we map out demographics, age, income, and then we evolved it into psychographics to see where there were some areas that we were missing. And one of the things that came about was, hey, we got really bad health scores. And the brewers, now this is what was really interesting. There were so many beer breweries established, and they were just crazy rich new oligarchs were coming in and building these factories with massive capital investment. But they had so much free capacity that they were like, oh, well, you know what? We go back and making kvass. So then kvass starts selling, and it starts chipping into the soft drink sales. And I said, okay. And so I said to my boss at the time, I said, listen, I really think that this is an opportunity for us to get into. And he's like, yeah, but we can't do it. We don't make it we don't have production facilities for that. And per Russian law, we have to make it through a fermented process. And Coca-Cola has never done that. I said, I like a great opportunity. So when Muhtar Kent and Sir Neville Isdale, our former chairman and CEO, came to Russia, we had an analyst meeting, and I had a presentation on opportunities. And so I pitched a $30 million investment for us to go into this category. And I wanted a green light for us to go develop concepts and then find solutions to it. And after the meeting, Neville comes up to me and says, this is exactly what we need to be doing here. And I was just like, crown on the jewel. There is that best thing in the world. I got the chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola saying, this is exactly what we need to do. So green lighted that. And then we started working with the Ministry of Kvass, because in Russia, there's a ministry for everything, right? And my brand team I put together, and I put together a cross-functional team. Our technical leader, Sasha Boroshenko, wonderful guy, he says to me after the project launched and everything, he says, Shawn, do you realize since 1886, Coca-Cola has been trying to keep the bacteria out of our production facilities. And here you are coming in and bringing this nightmare into, and I said, well, Sasha, here's the ironic twist. It took an American to bring a Russian product to the Russian consumers. But the exciting part of that whole project was we had to go up to Tver, up just a bit north of Moscow, and our internal security guy, who is former KGB, because there is no such thing as former.
Yeah.
Once you're KGB, you're always KGB. But he was our security guy, and he says, "Oh, Shawn, you're going to have a meeting up in Tver. I need to come with you." And I said, "Okay." He says, "Shawn, you need to understand, up in that area, the teeth of the law runs the show up there." And I'm like, "Whatever you say, just make sure I make it home." Okay. So we found a brewery that would be willing to allow us to put in our own dedicated pipes and do brewing up there. And the fun part was doing the consumer research on the brand name and the package design. And we had all these names that went in, and I went to my dear marketing director, Lilia Donskaya. And I said, Lilia, what does mug and barrel translate into Russian? And she goes, Krushki Bochka. I like that. And I said, okay, let's throw that into the research. Because, of course, here in the United States, we have mug and barrel root beer. And I thought, well, a mug and a barrel, that kind of sounds authentic and cool. That was the best scoring one. So Krushki Bochka it was, right? And then our CEO at the time, Muhtar Kent, he said, let's put it in 0.5 liter bottles as well. And he says, because I want to sell it to Whole Foods in New York. So they shipped it from Moscow to New York for a short period of time, which was, I think, pretty cool. But it was a damn fine kvass, I'll tell you. And I drank so much kvass I couldn't see straight. But it was a beautiful kvass that we made. And then we ended up going and buying up a kvass production facility in Ukraine and Belarus, and then we started making it a pan territory brand. And then economic times hit and things slowed down. And so I think that they pared it back, but I think the bottle is still out there. I saw it when I was with Carlsberg. When I was back in Ukraine, I was in Lviv for a conference, and I actually doing a market store check, and I saw the bottle, and I'm like, hey, I made this. Yeah, it was really fun to see that.
Oh, that's great. And you mentioned that you work in Africa, in Lagos, Nigeria.
Yeah.
Right?
So when I was working with the joint venture, well, I wasn't living there, but I was going down there. So in the joint venture, so my wife and I moved to Russia. My wife got pregnant. We saw the opportunity to come back to Zurich. So we came back to Zurich. We had our baby in 2006, our first son. And then I was become region director for the joint venture for not just a small territory, but for basically Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So, covered everything from tip to toe. So would be responsible for, I was in South Africa 4 times a year because we had an operation producing tea down there. And then we started looking at going into Nigeria with tea. And Nigeria is a huge population, huge population. And so went to Lagos to do consumer research. And, I'll tell you, for anybody that's been a Thunderbird, thinking about being a Thunderbird, to have the opportunity to travel to a different country, eat different food, and experience doing consumer research and being with people from a different culture is just absolutely electrifying. The only thing that was a little dodgy about this was when I landed at the airport, the team from Nigeria says, yeah, we're going to have our security guy meet you inside the terminal. And I'm like, okay. Guy meets me in the terminal. I said, well, why are you guys here? He says, you see all these guys around here? They're trying to shake everybody down for money before they get out, And I'm like, are you kidding me? So the guy helps me out. We get out and we're standing at the curb. He says, yeah, your driver will be here in a couple minutes. I'm like, okay, great. And then I see this pickup truck with two guys in the back holding on the roll cage with two AK-47s on their back. And I'm like, who are these guys for? And he says, I said, we got some government official coming. He says, no, that's your security. I'm like, just put a target on me. I mean, come on, guys. And then my driver pulls up, and then wonderful guy. And we're having a wonderful conversation, and we're driving to the hotel and driving the streets from the airport, and there's no street lights. There's no bridges to cross over. And there's people literally jumping on the freeway, running across. We nearly clipped the guy with our mirror. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, it was just, it's just kind of you're experiencing the day in the life that's normal for other people. And it was just fascinating. But doing the consumer research in Nigeria was absolutely exciting and electrifying because you're getting a whole different perspective on things. But then going out on the market and going out and looking in the market with the sales team, some of these Nigerians were some of the most entrepreneurial people I'd seen through the Coca-Cola system. And they are an exceptionally electric group to work with. And it was really a wonderful moment to be, because you'd walk in to a room and they had a map. It was like you're walking in a Churchill's war room. They had literally a map, the full wall. I mean, we're talking 15 meters by 3-4 meters tall of their area where they have the responsibility for. And they had each of these little teeny shacks. And I literally mean shacks because some of these people would be selling and they would say it would be a color for blue for Pepsi and red for Coke. And then they map out and there's just okay, well, we're going to be working on these guys over the next couple of weeks to switch them over from Pepsi sales guys to Coke sales guys. And it was literally a Churchill war room. And then I met this incredibly charming Nigerian woman. She was probably in her mid-40s and, the beautiful Nigerian dress. And she had this entrepreneurial idea and she approached Coke. She said, I'm going to put a 40-foot container on my lot. You guys can use it as a mid distribution point. So, because Coke used to drive a truck out and then they drive it back and it'd still be half full by the time they came back. And so she started bringing this entrepreneurship to her little territory. And it was just like, oh, this is great. I love it. It's just fascinating. Absolutely electric.
That's great. So then you went and you worked for a beer company, for Carlsberg.
Yeah.
So how was it different in terms of marketing strategy? Going from soft drink company to a beer company?
But you see, here's the interesting thing you missed out on is that I was responsible for non-alcoholic beer.
Okay.
So there's two angles to this. One of the first things I did was with my team, we were discussing and really good guy working on the team. He's like, I hate the word non. Why start with a negative? We got to go with a positive. And so we talked and we renamed our team Alcohol-Free Brews because from my previous experience working with Kvass and everything, I thought, you know what? If anything I can throw in the kettle is fair game. So we're going to call it brews, not alcohol-free beer, not alcohol-free, non-alcoholic beer. So we renamed the team and we re-scoped our role. My role as a global vice president for Carlsberg was to basically expand our development of our alcohol-free beers and expand the strategy and the direction of the growth. The most interesting part and the difference between, say, working for Coke and a brewery was in each of our territories, each of our different countries, they had many CEOs of each of their territories. A lot of the people that within Carlsberg were still of the mindset that there's a negative stigma about non-alcoholic beer. It's associated with alcoholics. There's nothing exciting about it. Or the best one is, what's the point? What's the point? Today, you see all these brands in the United States, Athletic Beer Company. There's a lot of people. And
total mind.
Ironically, alcohol-free beer is now growing at 10% a year. It's growing at electric rates. And people don't associate with alcoholics like happened when I was going to college. You'd see somebody drinking an O'Doul's or a Claustaller. You're thinking, okay, they're an alcoholic and they just need to have a taste of it, right? Part of the resetting, the mental restructuring, the mental repositioning from non-alcoholic beer to alcohol-free brews was to bring forth a new perspective that this is probably the healthiest beverage that you can provide yourself. So by taking out the alcohol and brewing and making a great tasting beer that is alcohol free, you're actually cutting your calories in half and you're not getting hit with the tariffs in each of the countries. So your profits are higher. So I thought, okay, this is great. We got some great selling stories for the region presidents and the territories. Nah, still, they're like, yeah, I understand where you're wanting to go, Shawn, but we make our money selling beer, and we're going to keep doing that. So it was a couple of years of convincing people over the period of time, seeing the progress, and people start to see that this is growing, this is getting exciting, that things eventually change. Versus at Coca-Cola, the thing was, okay, great, I understand it. It's a nice, refreshing beverage. It's not cannibalizing from the Coke users. I'm happy with that. So the Coca-Cola bottler's mindset is, what else can you give me to sell? I mean, come on, give me some more ammunition. I'm going to sell. And you give them the story and you tell them the profit picture and da-da-da. And then they go, okay, yeah, we like it. Boom. No issues. And so then the funniest part was when I was at Carlsberg, we were starting to get some momentum and people started getting excited about it. The former CEO of Carlsberg, who just retired a year and a half ago, he was very excited about what we were doing. But Carlsberg, one of the exciting things about working with Carlsberg was research is a very big part of the business. Carlsberg Research Lab is celebrated now the 150th year this year.
Oh, wow.
And you had such scientists working there, such as the Nobel laureate Niels Bohr worked at the Carlsberg lab. So you have some incredible people working there. But one of the things that I realized when I first started was the Carlsberg Research Lab created the pH scale. I mean, what the heck? Because the founder of Carlsberg wanted to have the best grains, the best water, the best yeast, and some of the success of the breweries today is because of Carlsberg, because Carlsberg most of the brewers back in the 1880s, they have to throw away half of their brewing because it had an off taste. And the Carlsberg Research Lab realized, oh, wait a minute, you've got competing yeast strains in the mix. So they took one yeast strain, pitched it in, and it had a perfect brew every time. And he just started printing money. And then he started supplying yeast to other. So working with this background of this incredible intellect and curiosity, and the kind of the motto of Carlsberg is Semper Ardens, which means always burning, always going for the best. I had a great relationship with the head of the Carlsberg Research Lab, and she says, we've got this new yeast strain, and we've got this interesting barley that is a pearl barley that when we use this unique yeast strain with this unique grain, the brewing process evolves into a very low alcohol level. So it means when we try to take the alcohol out through our filtering process, it's not as involved as taking just any old beer and then filtering it all out. This is very exciting. And so she brought a sample of the material, and it was like, it tastes like sweet water. I said, what we should do is we should make a craft brew and go after the soft drink companies. So my team put together great concepts, and we then launched a product called Barley Bros, which was a craft inspired beverage that was brewed. It was a brewed beverage that had no alcohol in it, that we added herbs and botanicals into it. And then we launched it in France and Russia and the Baltics. And it was an incredibly tasty beverage. It was wonderful. The only challenge we tried to get it on tap, but then we had to put preservatives in it so that it wouldn't go bad. And we didn't want to do that because it was preservative free, but it did exceptionally well. And so I think that when I first started Carlsberg, there was a mountain of challenges that slowly evolved into getting the openness of the organization to putting more attention and more investment into the alcohol-free beers. And then we evolved into these opportunities that got people excited. So these were all tools designed to, I think, obviously with commercial result with the full intent, but it was about changing the mindset and the opportunity of building some adjacent business outside of the normal business. So I think that's kind of been an approach that was a little different than Coke, because there wasn't as much resistance at Coke to Carlsberg. But like any business, you come in with an outside perspective, there's always going to be critical kind of disbelief for a period of time.
Yeah. Why is it, I'm just curious, why is it harder to find Carlsberg product in the US?
Well, see, the Carlsberg product in the U.S., because Carlsberg doesn't have we have an export organization that focuses on the export markets where we don't have a brewery in place. I think going back historically, the competition, see, Carlsberg is the number 3 brewer in terms of volume and profit, but
in the world.
Yeah, but you've got AB InBev right here. Then you've got Heineken here. And then Carlsberg is way down here. It's just, I think Carlsberg could do exceptionally well in the US, but it would take an incredible amount of money and time and effort to get what? And, you spend so much money just to get a little blip of share bump. And look at how entrenched the US market is and it's basically Bud Light, Coors Light, and it's, I think from a Carlsberg standpoint, it's much more of a strategic play to play in the areas where they're swimming in their lane. They're doing well in Europe, doing well in Canada, but outside of those markets, now they've invested in Britvic. So now they're diversifying and expanding into the soft drink space. But yeah, it's hard to find Carlsberg. It's you find it at your specialty beer shops and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
it's strictly a profit decision.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. So now you at Appy Pharma USA.
Well, actually, no. I have to provide an update on that because I left them last year, and so I've been doing consulting since then. So right now, I've been providing some support to a company called Besso in Switzerland, who've come at an incredible time. They're an AI organization that's designed to find loopholes or opportunities with trade negotiations and tariffs, and so that companies aren't leaving money on the table. And I've been helping them for the last year, and so they're doing an incredible job. So yeah, the Appy Pharma was a very interesting startup, a over-the-counter pharmaceutical company from Croatia, and trying to help get them a footprint here. So that was a fun thing because it was basically starting from 4 walls and a computer and basically putting together a whole brand concept, brand family, putting together the strategy, putting the whole e-commerce, the web page. I mean, you talk about doing what probably the 20-year-olds or the 20-year-olds are doing right now while they're still going to college. So it was exceptionally exciting putting that together and helping the team there and getting it off and getting it to grow to a great level, and then helping them just expand and diversify the portfolio. Then got it to the position that they needed and handed it off, and now doing some further consulting. And I've got some other projects in the pipeline that I won't talk about right now, but it's an exciting time to kind of do these things. And I think it fulfills that freedom of curiosity that I've always had through the corporate career, which has been exciting. And you start playing with certain things of equity share, and it gets kind of fun and exciting too, because you can only do so much in the corporate world, and then things get more exciting as you venture off into the private things.
Yeah, so you're working closely with the AI company, and it's a good segue to my next question. What trends do you see shaping the future of marketing and consumer behaving in the age of AI?
I'll tell you, just from the experience using AI, even from a personal standpoint of when we used to do research or putting together concepts or putting together some simple stuff to go like a brief to an advertising agency to come back with a couple ideas, you talk about a 3-month turnaround period. With AI, you can basically type in a brief, like even just a concept or a blog, if you will. When I was working with an ad agency, when we were doing the Powerade launch across Europe, working with the ad agency to put together a brief and our communication, our PR strategy. I mean, these were 4, 5, 6 months of, crazy heavy lifting. Now it's boom, 10 minutes later. And then with the marketing experience you have, you can sit there and go, okay, yeah, and modify it a bit. The thing that concerns me about the AI, it's a great tool. It's like a bolt-on tool. It's like if you were using a regular hammer and nail and somebody walks up to you and you're building a house and here's a box of nails, and here's a hammer, and the guy walks up with a nail gun. Here, boom, 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 boom. And now everybody goes, that's how they build houses today. AI is amplifying the skill set that knowledgeable people understand from years of marketing experience. Moving forward, the question is the new marketing students that are coming in, are they going to, they're not going to have that dynamic, right, that I went through to think through things. Because ironically, when you were briefing an agency, you put thought into the brief. You'd spend time typing the brief and putting together all the thoughts and all the data that you had and all this stuff. And then you'd have the discussions and the back and forth with the agency, and they'd provide their perspective, and you'd go, that's interesting. Based on what I know, da, 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 da. Now AI goes and does it. So the thing as we move forward in the future, and for my two sons right now, who leverage AI to try to find stuff that they can then incorporate into their papers or whatever, I think it's a great tool when you're trying to find information, find resources to build into your thinking. When people start letting AI do the thinking for them, I mean, there is going to be that thing that we're going to relinquish, because technology allows you to relinquish some of the things, because this AI is leveraging the thinking of the collective genius around the world from the stuff that's been put out there. I think it's one of those things where it's going to take away, but I'm really more wondering what it's going to do for what you would call organic thinking, because, and that's the conversation I've had with my wife, who's a strategic marketer as well. We talk about this with our kids, about the kids go, oh, that's not original. Okay. Well, AI is taking away some of the organic thinking. I mean, what would happen if Dostoevsky or some of these famous, because my son's reading White Knights right now. That's why it's on top of my head. What the writers of today and the original thinkers of today, how original are their thinkings of today? And what is organic thinking now? I just hope that, in the next 50 years that we're not, just, I don't know what we're going to be. I don't know what we're going to be. But I think that it's like in the hands of a professional, AI is fantastic. But is it going to take away? I don't know.
Well, time will tell. Before we wrap up this amazing conversation, I wanted to ask you a few quick questions. What advice would you give to a 20-year-old self, having your experience, and what do you know today?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great one. I think having the balance, because as a 20-year-old in that field that I was in, you could work 60 to 80 hours a week without flinching at it. And it's exciting when you get that momentum and you get that exciting movement, time just flies by and you get so absorbed in the work. I think striking the right balance and maintaining the health is a very important thing, because, once we get older, we start thinking about the health more than we do when we're 20, because when you're 20, there's nothing that's going to knock you down. My 18-year-old, he's gone off to Italy to go study, and the world is his oyster. And, just trying to give him those parental cautionary notes of, just stay locked in, stay focused. But, what would I tell my 20-year-old self? I'd say, just keep focused on the vision, be open and know when to change. And then just be curious. Curiosity opens more doors than you can ever imagine, and be welcoming to other perspectives. I think one of the things I made a couple notes, because one of the things that I think when you raise kids, you're like, oh, you got to try this food. Oh, it looks yucky. Try different things. And I think one of the things I used to tell when I was in ISAC was, when in Rome, don't do what the Romans do. I said, when you're in Rome, eat what the Romans eat, drink what the Romans drink, walk where the Romans walk, live life in Rome as a Roman. It's about experiencing, and take the opportunity to experience every opportunity you can, even if that means you're going to have to climb a tough hill, because you'll be better for it.
Do you have any message to Thunderbird alumni?
Yeah, things, I don't know, the alumni of the past that were on the campus with us, I'm still in touch with many of them. Matter of fact, I had a reunion, a small reunion, where I hadn't seen one of my buddies in 30 years and one of my other friends 15 years. And I just found out that my friend I hadn't seen 15 years lives 6 miles north of me. So well, I would say, for the Thunderbirds is that, and the conversations I've had with a lot of the Thunderbirds that are highly involved with the new campus, Thunderbird's going to continue to continue to do what it did for us. And I think that just to continue to be supportive of it with the new incarnation of it at the downtown Phoenix campus, there's still the exciting buzz in the building. It's just not spread over a campus like what we had that made it so special for us. And I would say that Thunderbird is, among my colleagues, is always a near and dear part of their life. And they've made it an incredible story to tell. My son even got accepted to Thunderbird, but he decided to go to Europe. So there's something about that. It's just something that you got to keep the flame going and continue to cherish what we had and keep driving forward for helping the school where it needs the help. And there's, students that are there that would really love the opportunity to speak to folks like us to understand some perspectives that maybe they don't have at the moment.
Excellent. And Shawn, what is your next dream travel destination? Is it Portugal?
It's so funny. I mean, I said to my wife after living and traveling all around the world, as I called it, being a corporate gypsy, I was like, I never went to Portugal. That's crazy. But you know what? We have property in Croatia. So my wife is Croatian. So we spend a lot of time in Croatia. But with our son now going to school in Milan and having a lot of friends in Milan and Lugano, I think we're going to be geographically kind of in that little territory as he's starting his 3-year undergraduate program. And then my younger one is wanting to study potentially architecture, and he was looking at schools in Italy. So I'm thinking, what is this Italian connection? Good thing is my wife speaks Italian, so that helps.
That's great. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you for your time, and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure, and stay well.
Thank you.